What's up, folks? Tonight's topic is mind-blowing. Ancient Egyptians got higher than you'd ever believe. So, without further ado, let's jump into the story. The sun blazed mercilessly over the Nile Valley as workers dragged massive limestone blocks toward what would become one of humanity's greatest monuments. But what they didn't know was that their daily existence was infused with substances that would make modern festival goers weep with envy. Ancient Egypt wasn't just a civilization of pharaohs and pyramids. It was a culture that had mastered the art of altered consciousness in ways that would absolutely blow your mind if you really understood the full scope of what they were doing on a regular basis. Picture this scene for a moment. It's around 2500 BCE, and you're walking through the bustling streets of Memphis, the ancient capital that thrived along the Nile's fertile banks. The air is thick not just with the humidity of the river, but with aromatic smoke drifting from countless workshops, homes, and temples, where priests and common folk alike are engaging in practices that involve mind-altering substances in ways that were so sophisticated and widespread that it challenges everything we think we know about ancient drug use. The morning light filters through this haze as people go about their daily routines, many of them already under the influence of various psychoactive compounds that were as common to their lives as coffee is to ours today. You see, when we think about ancient Egypt, our minds immediately jump to the obvious images: golden burial masks, towering pyramids stretching toward the heavens, elaborate hieroglyphs covering temple walls, and mummified pharaohs lying in eternal rest surrounded by treasures beyond imagination. But what we rarely consider, what hardly ever makes it into the documentaries or the museum exhibits, is the incredible extent to which these ancient people were getting absolutely hammered on a variety of substances that would make a modern pharmacologist's head spin with fascination and perhaps a little bit of professional jealousy. The Egyptians didn't just dabble in consciousness alteration as some kind of occasional religious, ritual, or ceremonial practice reserved for special occasions. Oh no, this was deeply woven into the very fabric of their society, from the highest echelons of the pharaoh's court down to the humblest farmer working the fields during the annual flood season. They had developed what could only be described as a comprehensive pharmacological culture that encompassed everything from pain management and medical treatment to spiritual transcendence and what we might today recognize as recreational drug use, though they probably wouldn't have made such clean distinctions between these categories. Let's start with something that might surprise you: the sheer variety of psychoactive plants and substances that grew naturally in the Egyptian landscape, or were imported through their extensive trade networks that stretched across Africa, the Mediterranean, and deep into Asia. The fertile Nile Delta and the regions surrounding it were like a natural pharmacy, blessed with climate conditions that supported the growth of numerous plants containing compounds that could dramatically alter human consciousness in profound and lasting ways. Take the blue water lily, for instance, which wasn't just a pretty flower floating on the surface of ornamental ponds in wealthy estates. This beautiful aquatic plant, known scientifically as Nymphea caerulea, was absolutely loaded with psychoactive alkaloids including nuciferine and aporphine, compounds that produce effects ranging from mild sedation and euphoria to vivid, dreamlike states of consciousness that the Egyptians valued tremendously for both recreational and spiritual purposes. Archaeological evidence suggests that they were consuming this plant in absolutely massive quantities, not just occasionally, but as a regular part of their daily routine. But here's where it gets really interesting, and where modern research has revealed just how sophisticated their understanding of psychoactive substances really was. The Egyptians didn't just chew on raw plant material, or brew simple teas like some primitive culture stumbling around in the dark. These people had developed incredibly advanced extraction and preparation techniques that would make a modern chemist nod with respect and admiration for their ingenuity and deep understanding of botanical chemistry. They created complex fermented beverages that combined multiple psychoactive plants in carefully calibrated proportions, each recipe designed to produce specific effects depending on the intended purpose. Some mixtures were formulated for religious ceremonies, where priests needed to achieve particular states of consciousness to communicate with the gods, while others were designed for medical purposes, treating everything from chronic pain and depression to what we might today recognize as anxiety disorders and post-traumatic stress from warfare or personal trauma. The process of making these beverages was incredibly labor-intensive and required specialized knowledge that was passed down through generations of skilled practitioners. They would harvest the blue water lily petals at specific times of day when the alkaloid content was at its peak, then subject them to complex fermentation processes that could last for weeks or even months, carefully monitoring temperature, moisture, and other environmental factors to ensure optimal potency and flavor profiles. But the blue water lily was just the beginning of their psychoactive arsenal. Archaeological excavations have revealed evidence of widespread use of mandrake, a plant so potent and dangerous that it was surrounded by elaborate rituals and superstitions designed to protect those who dared to harvest and prepare it. The mandrake root contains powerful tropine alkaloids including scopolamine and atropine, substances that can produce intense hallucinogenic experiences characterized by vivid visual distortions, out-of-body sensations, and complete dissociation from normal reality. The Egyptians were well aware of both the therapeutic potential and the serious dangers associated with mandrake use. They developed sophisticated dosing protocols and preparation methods designed to minimize the risk of toxic overdose while maximizing the desired psychoactive effects. Priests who specialized in mandrake preparation underwent years of training to learn how to properly identify, harvest, and process the plant, and they were held in high regard within their communities for possessing such dangerous and valuable knowledge. Medical papyri from various periods of Egyptian history contain detailed instructions for preparing mandrake-based medicines for treating a wide range of conditions, from severe pain and insomnia to what appear to be descriptions of mental illness and emotional disorders. The famous Edwin Smith Papyrus, dating to around 1600 BCE, includes references to surgical procedures performed under the influence of mandrake-based anesthetics, suggesting that Egyptian physicians had developed remarkably sophisticated understanding of how to use psychoactive plants for medical purposes that wouldn't be matched in Europe for thousands of years. Now, if you think that's impressive, wait until you hear about their use of opium, because the evidence suggests that the ancient Egyptians were consuming this incredibly powerful narcotic on a scale that would make modern opioid crisis statistics look like amateur hour. Opium poppies were cultivated extensively throughout Egypt, and archaeological evidence indicates that poppy cultivation was so widespread and systematic that it represented a major agricultural sector of the ancient Egyptian economy. The Egyptians had discovered that by making shallow incisions in the seed pods of poppy plants at just the right stage of maturity, they could collect the milky latex that oozes out, which when dried becomes the crude opium that contains morphine, codeine, and numerous other powerful alkaloids. But they didn't stop there. They developed sophisticated processing techniques that allowed them to create opium preparations of varying strengths and purities, each tailored for specific purposes ranging from pain relief and cough suppression to recreational use and religious experiences. Tomb paintings and temple reliefs from various periods show scenes of opium preparation and consumption that are so detailed and specific that modern archaeologists have been able to reconstruct the exact methods used by ancient Egyptian drug manufacturers. These images show workers carefully scoring poppy pods, collecting the precious latex in small containers, and processing it through various stages of refinement, using techniques that demonstrate a deep understanding of the chemistry involved in opium production. But perhaps most remarkable is the evidence that opium use wasn't restricted to the wealthy elite or the priestly class. It appears to have been consumed by people from all levels of society, from pharaohs to farmers. Mummy studies using modern analytical techniques have detected opium metabolites in the hair and tissue samples of individuals from widely different social backgrounds, suggesting that access to this powerful narcotic was much more democratic than we might expect from such an ancient civilization. The religious and spiritual dimensions of Egyptian drug use are where things get really mind-bending, because these weren't just people getting high for fun or using medicine to treat illness. They had developed elaborate theological and philosophical frameworks that incorporated psychoactive substances as essential tools for communicating with the divine realm and achieving transcendent states of consciousness that they believed were necessary for both individual spiritual development and the proper functioning of their entire civilization. Temple complexes throughout Egypt contained specialized chambers and facilities dedicated to the preparation and consumption of psychoactive substances under carefully controlled ritual conditions. These weren't dark, secretive drug dens hidden away from public view. They were magnificent, beautifully decorated spaces that were considered among the most sacred and important areas within the temple complexes, places where the boundary between the human and divine worlds became permeable through the careful application of consciousness-altering substances. The priests who oversaw these ritual drug experiences underwent extensive training that could last for decades, learning not just the practical skills needed to prepare and administer various psychoactive compounds, but also the complex theological and philosophical concepts that provided the framework for interpreting and integrating the experiences that resulted from their use. These priest-pharmacists were among the most educated and respected members of their society, possessing knowledge that was considered both scientifically valuable and spiritually essential. During major religious festivals, which occurred regularly throughout the Egyptian calendar year, entire populations would participate in mass psychoactive experiences that could last for days or even weeks. The Festival of Apet, for example, was an annual celebration that involved the entire city of Thebes in elaborate rituals that included the consumption of various fermented beverages and other consciousness-altering substances. Archaeological evidence suggests that these festivals were characterized by collective altered states of consciousness that bonded the community together through shared transcendent experiences. But the Egyptians weren't content to limit their psychoactive exploration to locally available plants. Their extensive trade networks brought them access to exotic substances from across the known world, creating what might be considered the first global drug marketplace. Merchants traveling ancient trade routes carried not just gold, ivory, and spices, but also carefully preserved psychoactive plants and preparations that were highly valued for their consciousness-altering properties. From the highlands of Ethiopia came khat, a stimulant plant containing cathinone that produces effects similar to amphetamines, providing energy, alertness, and euphoria that made it popular among workers engaged in physically demanding labor, as well as scholars and scribes who needed to maintain focus during long hours of detailed work. The Egyptians developed sophisticated methods for preserving khat during the long journey from its native growing regions, ensuring that it arrived in Egyptian markets with its psychoactive properties intact. From across the Red Sea came frankincense and myrrh, aromatic resins that, when burned, produce psychoactive smoke containing compounds that induce mild altered states of consciousness, characterized by relaxation, spiritual awareness, and enhanced sensory perception. These substances were so highly valued that they were considered worth their weight in gold, and their use was closely associated with the most important religious ceremonies and royal occasions. Even more exotic substances arrived from the distant reaches of the African continent, including various species of acacia trees whose bark contains significant concentrations of dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, one of the most powerful psychoactive compounds known to humanity. DMT produces intense, short-duration hallucinogenic experiences characterized by encounters with otherworldly entities and complete transcendence of ordinary consciousness, effects that the Egyptians interpreted as direct communication with their gods and ancestors. The preparation and use of DMT-containing acacia preparations required extreme skill and caution, as the compound is notoriously difficult to extract and stabilize using ancient techniques. Egyptian priest-chemists developed sophisticated methods involving complex combinations of acidic and basic plant materials that could extract and concentrate the DMT while making it orally active, a process that modern science recognizes as remarkably advanced for its time period. Archaeological excavations at various temple sites have uncovered evidence of large-scale psychoactive substance preparation facilities that were essentially ancient pharmaceutical laboratories, equipped with specialized equipment for grinding, mixing, filtering, distilling, and fermenting various plant materials into potent consciousness-altering preparations. These facilities included sophisticated ventilation systems to handle toxic fumes, temperature-controlled storage areas for preserving sensitive compounds, and quality control procedures to ensure consistent potency and purity of the final products. The scale of these operations is truly staggering when you consider the technological limitations of the time period. Some temple complexes appear to have been capable of producing psychoactive substances in quantities sufficient to supply entire cities during major festivals and ceremonies. The logistics involved in coordinating the cultivation, harvesting, processing, and distribution of these materials represents a level of organizational sophistication that rivals modern pharmaceutical companies. Workers at these facilities were highly specialized craftsmen who spent years learning their trade, and they were compensated accordingly. Archaeological evidence suggests that skilled psychoactive substance preparers enjoyed social status and economic rewards comparable to other highly valued artisans like goldsmiths, master builders, and court physicians. Their knowledge was so valuable that it was often passed down through family lines as closely guarded trade secrets. The medical applications of psychoactive substances in ancient Egypt were incredibly sophisticated and comprehensive, covering virtually every aspect of physical and mental health that we recognize today. Egyptian physicians, many of whom were also priests trained in the ritual use of consciousness-altering substances, understood that the boundary between physical and psychological healing was artificial, and they developed treatment protocols that addressed the whole person through carefully orchestrated combinations of psychoactive medicines, ritual practices, and therapeutic interventions. Pain management was one area where Egyptian physicians excelled through their use of opium-based preparations that were far more effective than anything available in Europe until relatively recent times. But they didn't just use opium as a crude analgesic. They had developed sophisticated understanding of dosing protocols, delivery methods, and combination therapies that maximized pain relief while minimizing the risk of addiction and overdose. For surgical procedures, Egyptian physicians used complex anesthetic preparations that combined opium with other consciousness-altering plants to produce deep unconsciousness that allowed them to perform remarkably complex operations. Archaeological evidence suggests that they were capable of performing skull surgery, limb amputations, and even primitive forms of cardiac surgery under the influence of these ancient anesthetics, achieving survival rates that wouldn't be matched in Europe until the development of modern surgical techniques. Mental health treatment was another area where psychoactive substances played a central role in Egyptian medicine. physicians recognized various forms of what we would today call depression, anxiety, psychosis, and post-traumatic stress disorder, and they had developed specific treatment protocols involving carefully calibrated doses of various consciousness-altering plants administered in therapeutic settings designed to facilitate healing and recovery. These ancient psychiatric treatments often involved extended therapeutic sessions that combined psychoactive substances with talk therapy, artistic expression, music, dance, and other healing modalities in ways that anticipate modern psychedelic-assisted therapy approaches. Patients would undergo supervised psychoactive experiences designed to help them process trauma, gain new perspectives on their problems, and develop healthier patterns of thinking and behavior. The integration of psychoactive substances into Egyptian burial and mummification practices reveals another fascinating dimension of their relationship with consciousness-altering compounds. The mummification process itself involved the use of numerous psychoactive plant materials, both as preservatives and as spiritual aids designed to facilitate the deceased person's journey through the afterlife. Mummies have been found with their body cavities packed with psychoactive herbs and resins, and many burial chambers contain elaborate collections of vessels, pipes, and other paraphernalia associated with the consumption of consciousness-altering substances. This practice reflects the Egyptian belief that psychoactive experiences were essential not just for life in this world, but for successful navigation of the complex spiritual challenges that awaited the soul after death. The famous Egyptian Book of the Dead contains numerous references to the use of various substances during the journey through the underworld, suggesting that the Egyptians viewed consciousness alteration as a fundamental skill that needed to be mastered both in life and in death. Tomb paintings and reliefs often depict scenes of the deceased enjoying psychoactive substances in the company of gods and ancestors, reinforcing the idea that these materials were considered essential tools for spiritual development and divine communication. Some tombs contain actual caches of psychoactive substances that were presumably intended for use by the deceased in the afterlife, including carefully preserved samples of opium, psychoactive mushrooms, and various fermented beverages. The astronomical and mathematical achievements of ancient Egypt take on new significance when viewed in the context of their extensive use of consciousness-altering substances. The precise alignment of the pyramids with celestial bodies, the accurate prediction of eclipses and other astronomical events, and the development of sophisticated mathematical concepts may have been facilitated by insights gained during altered states of consciousness induced by psychoactive plants. Many cultures throughout history have reported that certain types of mathematical and scientific insights become more accessible during psychoactive experiences. And there's growing scientific evidence that some consciousness-altering substances can enhance pattern recognition, creative problem-solving, and the ability to perceive subtle relationships between seemingly unrelated phenomena. The Egyptians may have been deliberately using psychoactive substances as tools for scientific and mathematical discovery, much like modern researchers are beginning to explore the potential of psychedelics for enhancing scientific creativity and insight. The architectural achievements of ancient Egypt also take on new dimensions when considered in the context of widespread psychoactive substance use. The otherworldly quality of many Egyptian temples and monuments, with their strange proportions, bizarre decorative elements, and disorienting spatial relationships, may reflect the influence of consciousness-altering experiences on the architects and builders who designed and constructed these remarkable structures. Some researchers have suggested that certain Egyptian architectural features were specifically designed to enhance or trigger altered states of consciousness in visitors, creating built environments that naturally induced psychological states similar to those produced by psychoactive substances. The acoustic properties of the Great Pyramid, for example, create resonance patterns that some people find conducive to meditative or transcendent experiences, suggesting that the builders may have intentionally incorporated elements designed to alter consciousness through purely architectural means. The artistic achievements of ancient Egypt also reflect the profound influence of psychoactive substances on creative expression. The distinctive visual style of Egyptian art, with its bold colors, geometric patterns, and otherworldly imagery, bears striking similarities to the visual hallucinations commonly reported during psychoactive experiences. Many of the gods and mythological creatures depicted in Egyptian art have the fantastical, hybrid characteristics that are typical of entities encountered during consciousness-altering experiences. Egyptian artists may have been using psychoactive substances not just for recreational purposes, but as deliberate tools for accessing the visionary states that inspired their most creative and innovative work. This practice would be consistent with the use of consciousness-altering substances by artists and creative individuals in many other cultures throughout history, and it might explain the remarkably consistent and distinctive visual style that characterized Egyptian art across thousands of years. The decline of ancient Egyptian civilization coincided with various political, economic, and environmental factors, but the gradual loss of their sophisticated psychoactive substance traditions may have played an underappreciated role in the collapse of their cultural achievements. As Egypt was conquered by successive waves of foreign rulers who didn't understand or appreciate the central role of consciousness-altering substances in Egyptian society, much of this ancient knowledge was lost or driven underground. The rise of Christianity in Egypt during the later periods of the Roman occupation was particularly devastating to the psychoactive substance traditions, as the new religion viewed consciousness alteration through plant medicines as pagan and demonic. Temples were destroyed, libraries burned, and practitioners persecuted, resulting in the loss of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge about the safe and effective use of psychoactive substances for medical, spiritual, and creative purposes. Modern archaeological research is slowly beginning to reconstruct the extent and sophistication of ancient Egyptian psychoactive substance use, but much of this knowledge may be lost forever. Chemical analysis of mummy tissues, examination of ancient vessels and preparation equipment, and careful study of artistic and textual references are revealing glimpses of practices that were far more advanced and widespread than anyone previously imagined. The implications of these discoveries extend far beyond academic archaeology. They challenge our assumptions about the capabilities of ancient peoples, force us to reconsider the role of consciousness-altering substances in human cultural development, and suggest that we may have much to learn from ancient approaches to using psychoactive plants for healing, creativity, and spiritual growth. Contemporary researchers studying psychedelic-assisted therapy, consciousness research, and the medical applications of various plant medicines are finding that some of their most promising approaches have ancient precedents in Egyptian and other traditional practices. The sophisticated understanding of set and setting, careful attention to dosing and preparation, integration of psychoactive experiences with therapeutic and spiritual practices, and recognition of the importance of skilled guides and facilitators all echo principles that were well understood by ancient Egyptian practitioners thousands of years ago. The Egyptian approach to psychoactive substances was characterized by a level of sophistication, safety, and integration that modern society is only beginning to rediscover. Rather than viewing consciousness-altering substances as dangerous drugs to be prohibited and feared, the Egyptians understood them as powerful tools that could be used safely and effectively when approached with proper knowledge, respect, and preparation. Their success in creating a stable, prosperous, and culturally advanced civilization that lasted for thousands of years, while maintaining widespread use of powerful psychoactive substances, challenges modern assumptions about the relationship between drug use and social dysfunction. The Egyptian example suggests that consciousness-altering substances, when used within appropriate cultural and institutional frameworks, can contribute to rather than detract from human achievement and social progress. The recent resurgence of interest in psychoactive substances for medical and therapeutic purposes has created new opportunities to study and potentially revive some of the ancient Egyptian approaches to consciousness alteration. Modern analytical chemistry has made it possible to identify and study the specific compounds that the Egyptians were using, while advances in neuroscience and psychology are providing new insights into how these substances affect human consciousness and behavior. Some researchers are actively working to reconstruct ancient Egyptian psychoactive substance preparations using archaeological evidence and traditional knowledge from surviving indigenous cultures. These efforts have revealed the incredible sophistication of ancient extraction and preparation techniques, many of which produced results that rival or exceed what can be achieved using modern methods. The potential applications of this ancient knowledge are enormous, ranging from the development of new medicines and therapeutic approaches to innovations in consciousness research and human potential development. By studying how the Egyptians successfully integrated powerful consciousness-altering substances into their society, we may be able to develop more effective and safer approaches to using these tools in our own time. But the Egyptian psychoactive substance traditions also raise important questions about the relationship between individual experience and social organization. How did a society maintain stability and functionality while so many of its members were regularly using powerful consciousness-altering substances? What institutional structures and cultural practices made this possible? How did they prevent the social problems that we associate with widespread drug use in modern societies? The answers to these questions may lie in the Egyptian understanding of consciousness alteration as a sacred and regulated practice rather than a recreational activity. Psychoactive substance use was embedded within religious, medical, and social institutions that provided structure, guidance, and meaning to the experience. Users weren't left to navigate altered states of consciousness alone. They were supported by trained facilitators, traditional knowledge systems, and community practices that helped them integrate their experiences in positive and productive ways. The Egyptian approach also emphasized the importance of proper preparation, both in terms of the substances themselves and the mental and spiritual preparation of the users. Consciousness alteration wasn't treated as a casual or impulsive activity, but as a serious undertaking that required careful planning, appropriate setting, and skilled supervision. This approach maximized the benefits while minimizing the risks associated with powerful psychoactive substances. Education played a crucial role in the Egyptian psychoactive substance traditions. Users were expected to develop extensive knowledge about the plants and preparations they were using, including their effects, risks, proper dosing, and appropriate applications. This knowledge was considered essential for safe and effective practice, and it was transmitted through formal educational institutions as well as informal apprenticeship relationships. The integration of psychoactive experiences into daily life was another key aspect of the Egyptian approach. Rather than treating consciousness-altering experiences as isolated events separate from ordinary life, the Egyptians developed practices and institutions that helped people incorporate insights and experiences from altered states into their regular activities and relationships. This integration process was considered just as important as the psychoactive experiences themselves. Modern societies struggling with drug-related problems might benefit from studying the Egyptian model of successful psychoactive substance integration. Rather than relying primarily on prohibition and punishment, the Egyptian approach emphasized education, regulation, community support, and the cultivation of wisdom and responsibility among users. This approach appears to have been remarkably successful in allowing the benefits of consciousness alteration, while avoiding many of the negative consequences that we associate with drug use today. The Egyptian understanding of consciousness itself may have been fundamentally different from modern Western concepts in ways that influenced their approach to psychoactive substances. Rather than viewing consciousness as something that happens inside individual brains, the Egyptians may have understood it as something that extends beyond individual boundaries and connects people to larger cosmic and spiritual realities. This perspective would naturally lead to viewing consciousness-altering substances not as mere chemical intoxicants, but as tools for accessing expanded dimensions of awareness that have objective reality and practical significance. From this viewpoint, psychoactive experiences aren't just subjective hallucinations, but genuine encounters with aspects of reality that are normally hidden from ordinary perception. The Egyptian emphasis on the afterlife and the continuation of consciousness beyond physical death also influenced their relationship with psychoactive substances. If consciousness survives death and continues in other realms, then developing skill in navigating non-ordinary states of consciousness becomes a practical necessity for successful existence in both this world and the next. Psychoactive substances were viewed as training tools that helped people develop the consciousness skills they would need throughout their eternal existence. The complex Egyptian mythology, with its elaborate descriptions of gods, demons, and otherworldly realms, may have been based on actual encounters with these entities during psychoactive experiences. Many of the characteristics attributed to Egyptian deities correspond closely to the types of beings that people commonly encounter during powerful consciousness-altering experiences, suggesting that Egyptian religion may have been grounded in direct visionary experiences rather than abstract theological speculation. This interpretation is supported by the fact that Egyptian religious practices placed such heavy emphasis on achieving direct personal contact with divine beings through various forms of consciousness alteration. The ultimate goal of Egyptian spiritual practice wasn't just to believe in the gods, but to actually meet them and develop ongoing relationships with them through regular psychoactive encounters. The practical implications of this approach extended far beyond religious and spiritual concerns. If the gods were understood as real beings who could be contacted through consciousness-altering experiences, then psychoactive substances became essential tools for receiving divine guidance on practical matters ranging from agricultural decisions and military strategy to artistic inspiration and scientific discovery. Egyptian rulers regularly consulted with prehistoricals who used psychoactive substances to communicate with divine beings and receive guidance on matters of state. These consultations weren't viewed as superstitious rituals, but as practical methods for accessing wisdom and information that wasn't available through ordinary means. The success of Egyptian civilization over thousands of years suggests that this approach may have been more effective than modern skeptics might assume. The Egyptian integration of psychoactive substances into agricultural practices reveals another dimension of their sophisticated understanding of consciousness alteration. Farmers and agricultural workers regularly used various plant medicines not just for recreation or spiritual purposes, but as practical tools for enhancing their ability to work with natural cycles and optimize crop production. Certain psychoactive plants were believed to enhance intuitive understanding of soil conditions, weather patterns, and plant health in ways that improved agricultural outcomes. Farmers who used these substances reported increased sensitivity to subtle environmental cues that helped them make better decisions about planting, watering, harvesting, and other agricultural activities. This approach to psychoactive enhanced agriculture may seem primitive from a modern scientific perspective, but it's worth noting that many traditional agricultural practices that were once dismissed as superstitious have later been validated by scientific research. The Egyptian farmers may have been accessing genuine insights about agricultural systems through their consciousness-altering practices. insights that we're only beginning to understand through modern ecological science. The use of psychoactive substances in Egyptian craftsmanship and manufacturing also demonstrates the breadth of their applications beyond religious and medical contexts. Skilled artisans working in various trades regularly used consciousness-altering substances to enhance creativity, improve focus, increase sensitivity to subtle details, and access innovative solutions to technical problems. Goldsmiths, jewelers, and other workers creating luxury goods for the pharaohs and wealthy elite used specific psychoactive preparations designed to enhance visual perception and manual dexterity. These substances allowed them to work with extraordinary precision and attention to detail, producing artifacts of remarkable beauty and technical sophistication that continue to amaze modern observers. Textile workers used different consciousness-altering substances that enhance their ability to work with complex patterns and color combinations. The intricate designs found in Egyptian fabrics, with their sophisticated use of geometric patterns and symbolic imagery, may have been inspired and facilitated by psychoactive experiences that enhanced pattern recognition and artistic vision. Even mundane manufacturing activities like pottery production and tool making incorporated consciousness-altering substances in ways that improved both the quality of the final products and the satisfaction of the workers. The Egyptians understood that consciousness alteration could enhance human performance in virtually any activity when applied skillfully and appropriately. The Egyptian approach to combining different psychoactive substances reveals a level of pharmacological sophistication that rivals modern drug development research. Rather than using single substances in isolation, Egyptian practitioners developed complex formulations that combined multiple consciousness-altering plants in carefully calibrated proportions, designed to produce specific desired effects while minimizing unwanted side effects. These combination formulas were the result of centuries or even millennia of careful experimentation and observation. Each preparation was designed for particular applications, whether medical treatment, religious ceremony, creative work, or recreational use. The formulas were closely guarded secrets, passed down through specialized lineages of practitioners who spent decades learning the subtle arts of psychoactive substance combination. Modern analytical chemistry has revealed that some of these ancient combinations produced synergistic effects that were more powerful and more precisely targeted than what could be achieved using any of the individual components alone. The Egyptians had discovered principles of drug interaction and combination therapy that we're only beginning to understand through contemporary pharmaceutical research. The seasonal and astronomical timing of psychoactive substance use in ancient Egypt reflects their understanding of how consciousness alteration could be optimized through attention to natural cycles and cosmic influences. Different substances and preparations were used at different times of year, coordinated with agricultural cycles, astronomical events, and religious festivals to maximize their effectiveness and significance. This approach recognized that consciousness itself may be influenced by factors like seasonal light cycles, lunar phases, planetary positions, and other environmental variables that affect human physiology and psychology. By timing psychoactive experiences to coincide with optimal natural conditions, the Egyptians may have achieved more powerful and meaningful results than would have been possible using the same substances under different circumstances. The elaborate astronomical calendars and timing systems developed by Egyptian priest astronomers were used not just for agricultural and administrative purposes, but also for optimizing the scheduling of consciousness-altering activities. Major psychoactive ceremonies were timed to coincide with specific astronomical configurations that were believed to enhance the effectiveness of the substances being used. Modern chronobiology research has begun to validate some of these ancient insights about the importance of timing in determining the effects of various interventions on human consciousness and physiology. Factors like circadian rhythms, seasonal affective patterns, and lunar cycles appear to influence how people respond to psychoactive substances, suggesting that the Egyptian attention to timing may have had solid scientific foundations. The role of music, dance, and other sensory stimulation in Egyptian psychoactive practices reveals their sophisticated understanding of how consciousness alteration could be enhanced and directed through careful manipulation of the sensory environment. Psychoactive experiences didn't occur in sensory isolation, but were carefully orchestrated multimedia events that combined consciousness-altering substances with precisely designed visual, auditory, and kinesthetic stimulation. Egyptian temples contained elaborate sound systems using architectural acoustics to create specific auditory environments that enhanced the effects of psychoactive substances. Different chambers were designed to produce different types of resonance and reverberation patterns, each calibrated to work synergistically with particular consciousness-altering preparations. The visual environments for psychoactive experiences were equally sophisticated, incorporating complex lighting systems, colorful decorative schemes, and carefully positioned artwork designed to interact with the altered perceptual states induced by various substances. The famous Egyptian art and hieroglyphic decorations found in temples and tombs may have been specifically designed to be viewed under the influence of consciousness-altering substances. With their bold geometric patterns and symbolic imagery, optimized for perception during altered states. Music and dance were integral components of Egyptian psychoactive practices, with different rhythms, melodies, and movement patterns used to guide and shape the consciousness-altering experience. Professional musicians and dancers underwent specialized training in how to use their arts to enhance and direct psychoactive states, creating sophisticated performance traditions that combined artistic expression with consciousness manipulation. The training and education of psychoactive substance practitioners in ancient Egypt involved extensive formal education that could last for decades. Students began their training as children and progressed through elaborate hierarchical systems that gradually introduced them to increasingly powerful and sophisticated consciousness-altering practices. The curriculum included not just practical skills like plant identification, substance preparation, and administration techniques, but also theoretical knowledge covering anatomy, physiology, psychology, theology, astronomy, mathematics, and other subjects considered essential for understanding and working with consciousness-altering substances safely and effectively. Advanced practitioners were expected to develop expertise in multiple specialties, including medical applications, religious and ceremonial uses, artistic and creative applications, and the training of new students. The most accomplished practitioners achieved social status comparable to high-ranking government officials or military leaders, reflecting the value that Egyptian society placed on their specialized knowledge and skills. The examination and licensing systems for psychoactive substance practitioners were remarkably sophisticated, involving both theoretical testing and practical demonstrations of competency. Students had to demonstrate not just technical knowledge, but also wisdom, judgment, and ethical standards appropriate for handling such powerful and potentially dangerous tools. The international exchange of psychoactive substance knowledge between Egypt and other ancient civilizations reveals the global dimensions of consciousness alteration practices in the ancient world. Egyptian practitioners maintained contact with colleagues in Mesopotamia, India, China, Greece, and other centers of learning, exchanging information about new substances, preparation techniques, and applications. This international network of consciousness researchers facilitated the rapid spread of innovations in psychoactive substance use throughout the ancient world. New discoveries made in one region were quickly communicated to practitioners in other areas, leading to continuous improvements in techniques and applications that benefited people across diverse cultures and geographical regions. Egyptian practitioners were particularly renowned for their expertise in substance combination and preparation techniques, and their methods were widely sought after by practitioners from other cultures. Egyptian-trained specialists traveled throughout the ancient world, establishing schools and training centers that spread Egyptian approaches to consciousness alteration far beyond the boundaries of Egypt itself. The reverse flow of knowledge also enriched Egyptian practices, as foreign substances and techniques were imported and adapted to local conditions and preferences. This cross-cultural exchange created a dynamic, evolving tradition that continuously incorporated new insights and innovations from around the world. The preservation and transmission of psychoactive knowledge through Egyptian scribal traditions represents one of the most remarkable achievements in the history of consciousness research, creating comprehensive libraries of information about consciousness-altering substances that would put modern pharmacological databases to shame in terms of their depth, practical applicability, and sophisticated understanding of human psychology and physiology. These ancient Egyptian texts, written on papyrus scrolls and carved into temple walls, contained incredibly detailed instructions for the preparation, dosing, and application of hundreds of different psychoactive substances, each with specific protocols for different types of users, medical conditions, spiritual objectives, and social contexts. The famous medical papyri that have survived to the present day represent only a tiny fraction of the original corpus of Egyptian psychoactive substance literature. Yet even these fragmentary remains reveal a level of sophistication, that challenges our assumptions about the capabilities of ancient science and medicine. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, the Ebers Papyrus, the Chester Beatty Papyrus, and other surviving medical texts contain references to dozens of consciousness-altering plants and preparations, with detailed instructions for their use in treating everything from chronic pain and mental illness to surgical anesthesia and end-of-life care. But beyond the medical applications, Egyptian scribes maintained vast libraries dedicated specifically to the religious, spiritual, and transcendent applications of psychoactive substances, documenting the complex theological frameworks that guided their use in temple ceremonies, mystery school initiations, and personal spiritual development practices. These texts described not just the practical aspects of substance preparation and administration, but also the elaborate philosophical and metaphysical concepts that provided meaning and context for consciousness-altering experiences. The loss of these libraries represents one of the greatest tragedies in the history of human knowledge, as thousands of years of accumulated wisdom about consciousness and its alteration were destroyed through war, religious persecution, and simple neglect. When the Great Library of Alexandria burned, it contained an estimated 40,000 scrolls dealing specifically with psychoactive substances and consciousness research, representing the collective knowledge of dozens of generations of Egyptian practitioners and researchers. Modern attempts to reconstruct this lost knowledge through archaeological investigation and careful analysis of surviving texts have revealed tantalizing glimpses of practices and understandings that were far more advanced than anything that would be developed again until very recent times. Chemical analysis of residues found in ancient vessels and preparation equipment has identified sophisticated extraction and purification techniques that produced remarkably pure and potent psychoactive preparations, using only the tools and materials available to ancient practitioners. The social organization of psychoactive substance use in ancient Egypt involved complex institutional structures that managed the production, distribution, and consumption of consciousness-altering materials on a massive scale while maintaining safety, quality control, and appropriate cultural integration. These institutions included specialized agricultural operations for cultivating psychoactive plants, manufacturing facilities for processing raw materials into finished preparations, training centers for educating practitioners, regulatory bodies for establishing standards and protocols, and distribution networks for ensuring appropriate access to these materials throughout Egyptian society. The scale and sophistication of these operations is truly staggering when viewed from a modern perspective. Archaeological evidence suggests that some temple complexes operated what were essentially ancient pharmaceutical companies, employing hundreds of workers in various stages of psychoactive substance production and distribution. These facilities included specialized growing areas with controlled environmental conditions for optimizing the potency of psychoactive plants, sophisticated processing equipment for extraction and purification, quality control laboratories for testing finished products, and warehouses for storing and aging various preparations. The workers in these facilities were highly trained specialists who spent years learning their particular aspects of psychoactive substance production. Master cultivators understood exactly when and how to harvest different plants for optimal alkaloid content, while expert processors knew how to extract and concentrate active compounds using complex multi-stage procedures that could take weeks or months to complete. Quality control specialists could assess the potency and purity of finished preparations through sophisticated testing procedures that ensured consistent results across different batches and production facilities. The distribution networks that supplied psychoactive substances throughout Egyptian society were equally sophisticated, involving complex logistics systems that coordinated the movement of materials from production centers to consumption sites across the entire kingdom. These networks had to account for the special storage and transportation requirements of various psychoactive substances, many of which were sensitive to light, temperature, moisture, or other environmental factors that could degrade their potency or safety. The economic impact of psychoactive substance production and distribution on ancient Egyptian society was enormous, representing a significant sector of the overall economy that provided employment for thousands of workers and generated substantial tax revenues for the government. The high value placed on consciousness-altering substances created incentives for innovation and efficiency improvements that drove technological development in areas ranging from agriculture and chemistry to transportation and storage. International trade in psychoactive substances was another major economic factor, as Egyptian preparations were highly sought after by wealthy customers throughout the ancient world. Egyptian consciousness-altering substances commanded premium prices in foreign markets, generating significant export revenues that helped fund the massive construction projects and military campaigns that characterized Egyptian civilization during its peak periods. The regulation and quality control systems developed by the Egyptians for managing psychoactive substance production and distribution were remarkably advanced, involving sophisticated legal frameworks, inspection procedures, and enforcement mechanisms that ensured safety and prevented adulteration or misuse. These regulatory systems recognized different classes of consciousness-altering substances with varying degrees of potency and risk, establishing appropriate controls and restrictions for each category. Low-risk substances like fermented beverages and mild plant preparations were widely available with minimal restrictions, while more potent materials like opium and hallucinogenic preparations required special licensing and supervision. The most powerful and dangerous substances were restricted to trained specialists working under carefully controlled conditions, with severe penalties for unauthorized possession or distribution. The inspection and testing procedures used to ensure quality and safety were surprisingly sophisticated, involving both chemical testing methods and biological assays using trained subjects who could assess the effects and potency of different preparations. These quality control systems helped prevent the distribution of adulterated or contaminated products that could cause harm to users, while also ensuring that preparations met standardized potency requirements. The legal frameworks governing psychoactive substance use recognize the importance of these materials for religious, medical, and cultural purposes, while also establishing appropriate safeguards to prevent abuse and protect public safety. These laws distinguished between legitimate use within appropriate institutional contexts and unauthorized or inappropriate use that could pose risks to individuals or society. The enforcement mechanisms included specialized law enforcement units trained in identifying and investigating psychoactive substance violations, as well as specialized courts with expertise in adjudicating cases involving consciousness-altering materials. Penalties for violations ranged from fines and temporary restrictions for minor infractions to imprisonment or even death for serious offenses involving dangerous substances or threats to public safety. The integration of psychoactive substance use into Egyptian family and social life reveals another dimension of how successfully these materials were incorporated into their civilization, without causing the social disruption and dysfunction that we often associate with drug use in modern societies. Egyptian families regularly used consciousness-altering substances together in contexts that strengthened family bonds and transmitted cultural values from one generation to the next. Family psychoactive experiences often centered around religious observances and seasonal celebrations that provided opportunities for shared transcendent experiences that reinforced spiritual beliefs and cultural identity. Children were gradually introduced to milder consciousness-altering substances as they matured, learning appropriate use patterns and cultural meanings through direct participation in family and community activities. The coming-of-age rituals that mark the transition from childhood to adulthood invariably involved consciousness-altering experiences designed to facilitate psychological and spiritual transformation. These initiation ceremonies used powerful psychoactive substances under careful supervision to induce profound altered states that helped young people integrate their new adult identities and responsibilities. Marriage ceremonies also incorporated psychoactive substances that were believed to enhance emotional bonding between partners and facilitate the spiritual union that was considered essential for successful marriages. Couples would share specially prepared consciousness-altering preparations that were thought to create lasting psychic connections that would strengthen their relationship throughout their lives together. Even funeral and mourning rituals used psychoactive substances to help family members process grief and maintain spiritual connections with deceased relatives. These materials were believed to facilitate communication with the spirits of the dead and provide comfort to the living during difficult periods of loss and adjustment. The role of women in Egyptian psychoactive substance traditions was particularly significant, as female practitioners often held positions of great authority and respect within the institutional structures that managed consciousness-altering activities. Women served as priestesses, healers, teachers, and researchers in numbers that were remarkable for ancient societies, reflecting the Egyptian recognition that consciousness alteration involved skills and insights that were not limited by gender. Female specialists often focused on applications related to childbirth, child rearing, healing, and spiritual guidance, developing expertise in consciousness-altering substances that could ease labor pains, treat childhood illnesses, facilitate emotional healing, and provide spiritual counseling. Their knowledge was particularly valued for its practical effectiveness and its sensitivity to the specific needs and experiences of women and children. The training of female practitioners followed similar patterns to male education, but often included specialized instruction in areas like midwifery, pediatric medicine, and family counseling that required deep understanding of how consciousness-altering substances could be used safely and effectively with pregnant women, nursing mothers, and children of various ages. Female practitioners also played important roles in the international exchange of psychoactive knowledge, as they often accompanied diplomatic missions and trade expeditions as specialized advisors on consciousness-altering substances. Their expertise was highly valued by foreign courts and institutions, and they served as cultural ambassadors who spread Egyptian approaches to consciousness alteration throughout the ancient world. The decline and eventual disappearance of Egyptian psychoactive substance traditions resulted from a complex combination of political, religious, and cultural factors that gradually undermined the institutional structures and knowledge systems that had supported these practices for thousands of years. The conquest of Egypt by successive waves of foreign rulers who didn't understand or appreciate the central role of consciousness alteration in Egyptian society led to the systematic destruction of temples, libraries, and training centers that had preserved this ancient wisdom. The rise of Christianity as the dominant religion in Egypt was particularly devastating to psychoactive substance traditions, as Christian leaders viewed consciousness alteration through plant medicines as pagan and demonic. The new religion promoted very different approaches to spiritual experience that emphasized faith, prayer, and moral behavior rather than direct visionary encounters with divine beings facilitated by consciousness-altering substances. Christian persecution of pagan practices led to the closure of temples, the burning of libraries, and the execution or exile of practitioners who refused to abandon their traditional practices. Much of the knowledge that had been accumulated over thousands of years was lost forever during this period of religious transformation, representing one of the greatest losses of scientific and spiritual knowledge in human history. The economic disruption caused by political instability and foreign occupation also contributed to the decline of psychoactive substance traditions, as the complex production and distribution systems that had supported these practices required stable social and economic conditions to function effectively. War, taxation, and administrative chaos disrupted the agricultural, manufacturing, and distribution networks that had supplied consciousness-altering substances throughout Egyptian society. The gradual loss of literacy and educational institutions during the later periods of Egyptian history meant that even when psychoactive knowledge survived, there were fewer people capable of reading, understanding, and transmitting the complex texts that contained this information. The sophisticated training systems that had produced generations of skilled practitioners gradually broke down, leading to a decline in the quality and safety of psychoactive substance use. The cultural changes that accompanied foreign rule also altered Egyptian attitudes toward consciousness alteration, as new values and beliefs replaced traditional understandings of the role and significance of psychoactive experiences. Younger generations, educated under foreign influence and Christian teaching, began to view their ancestors' consciousness-altering practices as primitive superstition rather than sophisticated science and spirituality. Despite these losses, some elements of Egyptian psychoactive substance tradition survived in various forms, often hidden within other cultural and religious practices, or preserved by isolated communities that maintained traditional ways of life. Some of this knowledge was absorbed into Islamic mystical traditions that developed during the Arab conquest of Egypt, while other elements were preserved by Coptic Christian communities that maintained certain pre-Christian practices in modified forms. Modern archaeological and historical research is slowly reconstructing aspects of these lost traditions through careful analysis of surviving texts, artifacts, and other physical evidence. Advanced analytical techniques are revealing new information about the substances and methods used by ancient Egyptian practitioners, while interdisciplinary approaches combining archaeology, chemistry, pharmacology, and anthropology are providing new insights into how these practices functioned within Egyptian society. The contemporary revival of interest in psychoactive substances for medical, therapeutic, and spiritual purposes has created new opportunities to study and potentially restore some aspects of ancient Egyptian consciousness-altering practices. Modern researchers are finding that many of the principles and approaches developed by Egyptian practitioners are remarkably relevant to current efforts to develop safe and effective applications for consciousness-altering substances. The Egyptian emphasis on careful preparation, appropriate setting, skilled guidance, and systematic integration of psychoactive experiences into daily life provides valuable lessons for modern practitioners who are working to develop responsible approaches to consciousness alteration. Their understanding of how to combine different substances for specific effects, how to optimize timing and environmental conditions, and how to provide proper support and guidance for users offers insights that could significantly improve contemporary practice. The sophisticated Egyptian understanding of the relationship between consciousness alteration and creativity, problem solving, healing, and spiritual development is particularly relevant to current research in these areas. Modern scientific studies are confirming many of the insights that Egyptian practitioners developed through thousands of years of careful observation and experimentation, suggesting that ancient wisdom and modern science can work together to advance our understanding of consciousness and its potential for enhancement. The institutional frameworks developed by the Egyptians for managing psychoactive substance production, distribution, and use may also provide models for modern societies that are grappling with how to regulate and integrate consciousness-altering substances in ways that maximize benefits while minimizing risks. Their approaches to education, quality control, safety monitoring, and cultural integration offer alternatives to the prohibition-based strategies that have dominated modern drug policy with generally unsuccessful results. The Egyptian example demonstrates that it is possible for societies to incorporate powerful consciousness-altering substances in ways that enhance rather than undermine social functioning, cultural achievement, and individual well-being. Their success in maintaining stable, prosperous, and creative civilization, while making extensive use of psychoactive substances, challenges modern assumptions about the incompatibility of drug use and social progress. However, it's important to recognize that the Egyptian model developed within a very different social, cultural, and technological context that may not be directly applicable to modern conditions. Their success depended on institutional structures, cultural values, and knowledge systems that took thousands of years to develop, and that were intimately connected to other aspects of Egyptian civilization that no longer exist. Modern efforts to learn from Egyptian psychoactive substance traditions must therefore be approached with appropriate caution and sensitivity to the differences between ancient and contemporary conditions. Simply copying ancient practices without understanding their cultural and institutional contexts could be ineffective or even dangerous, while ignoring the valuable insights available from these traditions would represent a missed opportunity to improve modern approaches to consciousness alteration. The most promising approach may involve careful study of Egyptian principles and methods combined with adaptation to modern conditions, using contemporary scientific knowledge and institutional capabilities. This could involve developing new forms of education and training for psychoactive substance practitioners, creating modern versions of the quality control and safety monitoring systems used by the Egyptians, and establishing cultural and institutional frameworks that support responsible use of consciousness-altering substances. The potential benefits of successfully integrating ancient wisdom with modern knowledge in this area could be enormous, offering new approaches to treating mental illness, enhancing creativity and problem-solving, facilitating spiritual development, and expanding human potential in ways that have been largely forgotten since the decline of Egyptian civilization. The Egyptians achieved remarkable things while maintaining extensive use of powerful psychoactive substances, and their example suggests that we might be able to do the same if we can learn from their successes while avoiding their mistakes. The rediscovery and restoration of Egyptian psychoactive substance traditions represents one of the most exciting frontiers in contemporary consciousness research, offering the possibility of reconnecting with ancient wisdom that could significantly advance our understanding of human potential and the tools available for its development. The Egyptians got higher than we've ever believed possible, and they did it in ways that enhanced rather than diminished their remarkable achievements in science, art, architecture, medicine, and spiritual development. Their example shows us that consciousness alteration through psychoactive substances need not be viewed as escapism or self-destruction, but can be understood as a sophisticated technology for human enhancement that, when used skillfully and responsibly, can contribute to individual flourishing and collective achievement, in ways that we are only beginning to understand and appreciate. The ancient Egyptians were true pioneers in the exploration of consciousness and its potential for expansion, and their legacy continues to offer valuable insights for anyone interested in understanding the full range of human potential and the tools available for its realization. The story of Egyptian psychoactive substance use is ultimately a story about human curiosity, ingenuity, and the endless quest for transcendence and meaning that has driven our species throughout history. The Egyptians took this quest further than perhaps any other civilization, developing sophisticated approaches to consciousness alteration that enabled them to achieve remarkable things while maintaining individual and collective well-being. Their example reminds us that the human potential for consciousness expansion is far greater than most of us imagine, and that the careful, responsible use of consciousness-altering substances can be a powerful tool for realizing this potential in ways that benefit both individuals and society as a whole. The astronomical connections between Egyptian psychoactive practices and their understanding of cosmic consciousness reveal layers of sophistication that modern researchers are only beginning to appreciate. As the ancient Egyptians developed elaborate systems for coordinating consciousness-altering experiences with celestial events in ways that suggest they understood profound connections between human awareness and cosmic cycles that we're still trying to understand today. Their temple complexes were designed not just as places of worship, but as sophisticated instruments for tracking astronomical phenomena and coordinating psychoactive ceremonies with optimal cosmic conditions that would enhance the effectiveness and significance of consciousness-altering experiences. The Great Pyramid of Giza, beyond its obvious function as a tomb for Pharaoh Khufu, served as an enormous astronomical calculator and consciousness-altering chamber, where initiates could undergo profound psychoactive experiences, while being precisely aligned with specific stellar configurations that the Egyptians believed were essential for achieving certain types of transcendent awareness. The internal passages and chambers of the pyramid were designed to focus and amplify both astronomical influences and the effects of consciousness-altering substances, creating an environment where human awareness could be expanded to cosmic proportions through the careful combination of architectural engineering and sophisticated pharmacology. Recent research using advanced imaging techniques has revealed that the pyramid contains hidden chambers and passages that appear to have been specifically designed for psychoactive ceremonies, complete with ventilation systems that would have been perfect for managing the smoke from burning consciousness-altering incenses, and sophisticated acoustic properties that would have enhanced the auditory aspects of transcendent experiences. These discoveries suggest that the pyramid was not just a tomb, but a massive consciousness-altering machine designed to facilitate the pharaoh's transformation into a divine being through the systematic application of psychoactive substances under optimal cosmic conditions. The precision with which the pyramid is aligned with various stellar configurations becomes even more remarkable when viewed in the context of consciousness alteration, as the Egyptians appear to have understood that different psychoactive substances work optimally when administered during specific astronomical conditions that enhance their effects and provide appropriate cosmic contexts for the experiences they produce. The pyramid's orientation toward the constellation Orion, which the Egyptians identified with Osiris, the god of death and resurrection, suggests that psychoactive experiences conducted within the structure were designed to facilitate encounters with this deity under conditions that maximize the likelihood of successful spiritual transformation. The elaborate calendar systems developed by Egyptian priest astronomers were used not just for agricultural and administrative purposes, but also for scheduling consciousness-altering ceremonies at optimal times when celestial conditions would enhance the effectiveness of various psychoactive substances and provide appropriate cosmic context for different types of spiritual experiences. These calendars tracked not only obvious phenomena like solar and lunar cycles, but also the movements of planets, the precession of stellar configurations, and subtle astronomical events that modern science is only beginning to recognize as potentially significant for human consciousness and physiology. The famous Dendera zodiac, carved on the ceiling of the Temple of Hathor, represents one of the most sophisticated astronomical documents ever created, containing detailed information about the relationship between celestial phenomena and consciousness-altering practices that demonstrates the incredible depth of Egyptian understanding in this area. The zodiac includes references to specific psychoactive substances that were used during particular astronomical configurations, along with detailed instructions for timing and coordinating consciousness-altering ceremonies to maximize their spiritual and practical effectiveness. Modern chronobiology research has begun to validate some of the Egyptian insights about the relationship between astronomical cycles and human consciousness, as scientists are discovering that various biological and psychological processes are indeed influenced by factors like lunar phases, seasonal light cycles, and even more subtle astronomical phenomena that the Egyptians somehow understood thousands of years ago. The Egyptian coordination of psychoactive experiences with these natural cycles may have been based on genuine scientific insights that we're only beginning to rediscover through contemporary research. The development of Egyptian mathematics and geometry was intimately connected to their psychoactive practices, as consciousness-altering experiences often provided insights into mathematical relationships and geometric principles that were then incorporated into architectural projects, astronomical calculations, and other practical applications that required advanced mathematical understanding. The famous golden ratio that appears throughout Egyptian architecture may have been discovered during psychoactive experiences that revealed the underlying mathematical harmonies that govern natural phenomena and human perception. Egyptian mathematicians and engineers regularly used consciousness-altering substances as tools for accessing intuitive insights into complex problems that couldn't be solved through ordinary analytical thinking, developing sophisticated methods for combining rational calculation with visionary inspiration in ways that produced mathematical and engineering achievements that still amaze modern experts. The precise calculations required for building the pyramids, predicting astronomical events, and creating the elaborate mechanical devices found in Egyptian temples may have been facilitated by psychoactive experiences that enhanced pattern recognition, spatial reasoning, and the ability to perceive subtle relationships between apparently unrelated phenomena. The geometric patterns found throughout Egyptian art and architecture often reflect visual experiences commonly reported during consciousness-altering states, suggesting that Egyptian artists and architects were deliberately incorporating visionary insights into their creative work in ways that created built environments optimized for inducing and enhancing altered states of consciousness. These patterns may have functioned as visual triggers that could induce mild altered states, even in the absence of psychoactive substances, creating architectural spaces that naturally facilitated transcendent experiences. The mathematical principles underlying Egyptian pyramid construction demonstrate understanding of advanced concepts like the relationship between pi and the golden ratio, the mathematical properties of various geometric forms, and sophisticated principles of structural engineering that required insights into the mathematical laws governing physical reality. Some of these insights may have been accessed through consciousness-altering experiences that revealed the underlying mathematical structures that govern natural phenomena in ways that weren't available through ordinary analytical thinking. The precision of Egyptian astronomical observations and predictions required mathematical capabilities that were far in advance of what would be achieved in Europe for thousands of years, suggesting that their psychoactive enhanced approach to mathematical discovery was remarkably effective for accessing insights into the quantitative relationships that govern celestial phenomena. Their ability to predict eclipses, track planetary movements, and maintain accurate calendars over thousands of years demonstrates mathematical sophistication that may have been facilitated by consciousness-altering practices that enhanced their ability to perceive and calculate complex cyclical patterns. The Egyptian understanding of harmonic relationships in music, architecture, and astronomy reflects sophisticated mathematical insights that may have been accessed through psychoactive experiences that revealed the underlying vibrational structures that govern all natural phenomena. The harmonic proportions found in Egyptian temples, musical instruments, and even the dimensions of the pyramids suggest that they understood fundamental principles about the mathematical nature of reality that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. The integration of psychoactive substances into Egyptian military practices reveals another dimension of their comprehensive approach to consciousness alteration, as Egyptian warriors regularly used consciousness-altering substances to enhance courage, reduce pain sensitivity, increase aggression when appropriate, and facilitate the psychological states necessary for effective combat performance. These military applications of psychoactive substances were carefully developed through systematic experimentation and were considered essential components of Egyptian military superiority over their enemies. Egyptian military units included specialized personnel trained in the preparation and administration of combat-specific psychoactive substances, ensuring that warriors could access optimal consciousness states for different types of military situations, ranging from defensive sieges and offensive assaults to reconnaissance missions and psychological warfare operations. These military pharmacologists were highly trained specialists who understood how to use consciousness-altering substances to enhance military performance, while minimizing the risks associated with their use in dangerous combat situations. The famous Egyptian military victories during the New Kingdom period may have been facilitated in part by their sophisticated use of consciousness-altering substances that gave their warriors significant psychological and physiological advantages over enemies who lacked access to similar technologies. Egyptian warriors under the influence of carefully selected psychoactive substances could fight longer, endure more pain, maintain better focus under stress, and recover more quickly from physical and psychological trauma than opponents who relied solely on conventional military training and equipment. The psychological warfare applications of Egyptian psychoactive substances were equally sophisticated, involving the strategic use of consciousness-altering smokes, aerosols, and other delivery methods to create confusion, fear, and disorientation among enemy forces, while simultaneously enhancing the confidence and effectiveness of Egyptian troops. These psychological warfare techniques represent some of the earliest examples of chemical warfare, though their primary purpose was to alter consciousness rather than cause direct physical harm. Egyptian intelligence and espionage operations also made extensive use of consciousness-altering substances for gathering information, influencing enemy decision-making, and facilitating covert operations that required enhanced psychological capabilities. Specially trained Egyptian spies used psychoactive substances to enhance their ability to blend into foreign cultures, extract information from unwilling sources, and maintain cover identities under stressful conditions that would normally compromise operational security. The diplomatic applications of Egyptian psychoactive substances were equally important, as Egyptian ambassadors and negotiators regularly used consciousness-altering substances to enhance their persuasive abilities, improve their understanding of foreign cultures and languages, and facilitate the development of personal relationships with foreign leaders that could advance Egyptian political interests. These diplomatic applications required great skill and cultural sensitivity, as inappropriate use of psychoactive substances in diplomatic contexts could create serious international incidents. Egyptian trade expeditions also relied heavily on consciousness-altering substances for managing the physical and psychological challenges of long-distance travel through hostile territories, maintaining group cohesion during extended voyages, and facilitating communication with foreign traders and suppliers who might speak different languages or follow different cultural practices. The success of Egyptian trade networks throughout Africa, the Mediterranean, and Asia may have been enhanced by their sophisticated use of psychoactive substances to overcome the practical challenges of international commerce in ancient times. The development of Egyptian writing systems and literary traditions was profoundly influenced by consciousness-altering experiences that provided inspiration for many of their most important texts, from religious and philosophical works to practical manuals and historical chronicles that documented their achievements and transmitted their knowledge to future generations. Egyptian scribes and scholars regularly used psychoactive substances to enhance creativity, improve memory, and access insights into the subjects they were writing about, creating literary works that reflected the expanded consciousness made possible through consciousness-altering practices. The famous Egyptian religious texts like the Book of the Dead, the Pyramid texts, and the Coffin texts contain numerous references to consciousness-altering substances and detailed descriptions of the altered states of consciousness that these materials could produce, suggesting that these foundational religious documents were at least partially based on direct psychoactive experiences rather than purely abstract theological speculation. The vivid imagery, complex symbolism, and detailed descriptions of otherworldly experiences found in these texts closely match the types of visions and insights commonly reported during powerful consciousness-altering experiences. Egyptian historical chronicles and administrative records also contain extensive documentation of psychoactive substance production, distribution, and use that provides valuable insights into how these materials were integrated into Egyptian society at all levels, from the pharaoh's court to ordinary farming communities. These records reveal the enormous scale and sophistication of Egyptian psychoactive substance operations, documenting everything from agricultural production statistics and manufacturing procedures to quality control protocols and distribution logistics. The development of Egyptian medical and scientific literature was similarly influenced by consciousness-altering experiences that provided insights into human anatomy, physiology, psychology, and the treatment of various diseases and conditions. Egyptian physicians regularly used psychoactive substances both as research tools for understanding medical conditions and as therapeutic agents for treating their patients, developing sophisticated medical knowledge that was far in advance of what would be achieved in Europe for thousands of years. Egyptian philosophical and ethical texts reflect the influence of consciousness-altering experiences that provided insights into fundamental questions about the nature of reality, human consciousness, moral behavior, and the meaning and purpose of existence. These philosophical works demonstrate remarkable sophistication in their treatment of complex metaphysical and ethical questions that continue to challenge modern thinkers, suggesting that psychoactive enhanced philosophical inquiry can produce insights that are both profound and practically applicable. The preservation and transmission of Egyptian knowledge through their library and educational systems was facilitated by consciousness-altering substances that enhanced memory, improved learning capacity, and provided motivation for the long-term study required to master complex subjects. Egyptian students and scholars used psychoactive substances not as distractions from serious study, but as tools for enhancing their educational experiences and accelerating their intellectual development in ways that enabled them to achieve remarkable levels of knowledge and skill. The eventual decline of Egyptian literacy and educational institutions contributed significantly to the loss of their psychoactive substance traditions, as much of this knowledge existed in written form that required educated specialists to read, understand, and transmit to future generations. When the educational systems broke down and literacy rates declined, much of the accumulated wisdom about consciousness-altering substances was lost forever, representing one of the greatest losses of scientific and practical knowledge in human history. Modern efforts to reconstruct Egyptian psychoactive knowledge face the challenge of working with fragmentary texts, incomplete archaeological evidence, and the loss of the cultural context that gave meaning and significance to these practices. However, advances in analytical chemistry, pharmacology, neuroscience, and other relevant fields are providing new tools for understanding and potentially recreating some aspects of ancient Egyptian consciousness-altering practices in forms that might be applicable to contemporary conditions and needs. The interdisciplinary nature of Egyptian psychoactive substance knowledge, which integrated insights from medicine, religion, astronomy, mathematics, chemistry, psychology, and numerous other fields, presents both challenges and opportunities for modern researchers who are accustomed to working within more specialized academic disciplines. Understanding Egyptian approaches to consciousness alteration may require new forms of interdisciplinary collaboration that can bridge the artificial boundaries between different areas of knowledge that the Egyptians saw as naturally interconnected aspects of a unified understanding of reality. The holistic worldview that underlies Egyptian psychoactive practices may be particularly valuable for contemporary consciousness researchers who are beginning to recognize the limitations of purely reductionist approaches to understanding human awareness and its potential for enhancement and expansion. The Egyptian integration of consciousness alteration with astronomy, mathematics, medicine, art, architecture, and spiritual development suggests that consciousness itself may be best understood as a multidimensional phenomenon that requires multidisciplinary approaches for full appreciation and effective practical application. The sustainable and regenerative approaches that the Egyptians developed for psychoactive substance production may also offer valuable lessons for modern societies that are grappling with environmental degradation and the need for more sustainable approaches to agriculture, manufacturing, and resource management. Egyptian psychoactive substance operations appear to have been designed to work in harmony with natural cycles and ecological systems in ways that maintained and enhanced rather than depleted the environmental resources they depended upon. The social justice implications of Egyptian psychoactive substance practices are also worth considering, as their approaches to production, distribution, and access appear to have been more equitable and inclusive than many modern drug policies, providing opportunities for people from all social backgrounds to access consciousness-altering substances appropriate to their needs and circumstances, while maintaining appropriate safeguards to prevent abuse and protect public safety. The Egyptian example suggests that it is possible to develop social policies around consciousness-altering substances that emphasize education, regulation, quality control, and cultural integration rather than prohibition, punishment, and marginalization, creating social conditions that maximize the benefits while minimizing the risks associated with psychoactive substance use. Their success in maintaining social stability and cultural achievement, while making extensive use of powerful consciousness-altering substances, provides evidence that alternative approaches to drug policy may be not only possible but potentially more effective than current prohibition-based strategies. The spiritual and transcendent dimensions of Egyptian psychoactive practices may be particularly relevant for contemporary people who are seeking meaning, purpose, and connection in an increasingly materialistic and fragmented world. As the Egyptian approaches to consciousness alteration were specifically designed to facilitate encounters with transcendent dimensions of reality that could provide guidance, inspiration, and healing for individuals and communities facing various challenges and difficulties. The legacy of Egyptian psychoactive substance traditions extends far beyond their historical significance, reaching into the very foundations of what it means to be human and the eternal quest for transcendence that has driven our species to explore every possible avenue for expanding consciousness and accessing deeper dimensions of reality that lie hidden beneath the surface of ordinary experience. The ancient Egyptians understood something profound about the nature of consciousness that we have largely forgotten in our modern rush toward technological solutions and pharmaceutical interventions, something that recognized the inherent capacity of human awareness to transcend its normal boundaries and access states of being that can transform not just individual lives, but entire civilizations. Their comprehensive approach to consciousness alteration was not merely about getting high or escaping from reality, but about systematically developing human potential in ways that enhanced creativity, wisdom, healing, spiritual understanding, and the capacity for building magnificent civilizations that could endure for thousands of years while maintaining harmony with natural cycles and cosmic rhythms. The Egyptians saw consciousness alteration as a fundamental human capacity that needed to be cultivated, refined, and integrated into every aspect of life, from the most mundane daily activities to the most sublime spiritual experiences. The sophistication of their understanding is evident in every aspect of their civilization, from the precise mathematical relationships embedded in their architecture to the complex astronomical alignments that govern their ceremonial calendars, from the advanced medical knowledge preserved in their papyri to the breathtaking artistic achievements that continue to inspire wonder and admiration thousands of years after their creation. All of this was achieved by people who regularly used consciousness-altering substances in ways that enhanced rather than diminished their capabilities, challenging every modern assumption about the relationship between drug use and human achievement. The depth of their pharmacological knowledge rivals, and in many ways exceeds what modern science has achieved, as they developed sophisticated understanding of how different substances affect consciousness, how to combine multiple compounds for specific effects, how to optimize dosing and administration techniques, how to create appropriate set and setting conditions, and how to integrate consciousness-altering experiences into broader patterns of personal development and social organization. Their success in these areas was achieved through thousands of years of careful observation, systematic experimentation, and the gradual accumulation of knowledge that was passed down through generations of dedicated practitioners. Their institutional approaches to managing psychoactive substance production, distribution, and use created social conditions that maximized benefits while minimizing risks in ways that allowed entire populations to access consciousness-altering substances safely and beneficially over extended periods of time. They developed educational systems that taught people how to use these powerful tools responsibly, regulatory frameworks that ensured quality and safety, and cultural practices that provided meaning and context for consciousness-altering experiences. The integration of psychoactive substances into their religious and spiritual practices created pathways for transcendent experiences that connected individuals directly with divine dimensions of reality, fostering personal relationships with gods and goddesses that provided ongoing guidance, support, and inspiration for navigating the challenges of human existence. These spiritual connections were not abstract beliefs, but lived experiences that shaped every aspect of Egyptian culture and provided the foundation for their remarkable achievements in art, science, architecture, and social organization. Their medical applications of consciousness-altering substances were equally sophisticated, as they developed effective treatments for physical and psychological conditions that wouldn't be matched in effectiveness until the development of modern pharmaceutical medicine. And in many cases, their approaches were gentler, more holistic, and more sustainable than contemporary medical interventions. They understood that healing involved not just treating symptoms, but addressing underlying imbalances in consciousness that manifested as physical and emotional problems. The artistic and creative applications of psychoactive substances produced some of the most beautiful and enduring works of human creativity ever created. From the stunning tomb paintings that continue to captivate viewers thousands of years after their creation, to the magnificent temples and monuments that represent the pinnacle of architectural achievement. Their consciousness-altering practices enhanced rather than diminished their creative capabilities, providing access to visionary states that inspired innovations in art, architecture, music, literature, and other creative fields. Their scientific and mathematical achievements were similarly enhanced by consciousness-altering practices that provided insights into the underlying patterns and relationships that govern natural phenomena, enabling them to develop sophisticated understanding of astronomy, mathematics, engineering, and other technical fields that formed the foundation for their remarkable architectural and technological achievements. Their pyramids, temples, and other monuments represent not just artistic achievements, but also profound scientific accomplishments that demonstrate their deep understanding of mathematical and engineering principles. The social and cultural dimensions of their psychoactive practices created communities bound together by shared transcendent experiences that fostered cooperation, mutual support, and collective commitment to maintaining and advancing their civilization across thousands of years. Their consciousness-altering practices strengthened rather than weakened social bonds, creating cultural cohesion that enabled them to undertake massive collective projects and maintain social stability through various challenges and changes. Their economic applications of psychoactive substances created sustainable prosperity that supported their remarkable cultural achievements while maintaining harmony with environmental systems and natural cycles. Their consciousness-altering practices were integrated into agricultural, manufacturing, and commercial activities in ways that enhanced productivity and innovation while maintaining ecological balance and social equity. The international dimensions of their psychoactive practices facilitated cultural exchange and diplomatic relationships that spread their knowledge and influence throughout the ancient world, while also enriching their own understanding through contact with other consciousness-altering traditions from different cultures and regions. Their openness to learning from others, while sharing their own knowledge, created networks of mutual exchange that advanced human understanding of consciousness and its potential for enhancement. The ultimate lesson of the Egyptian psychoactive traditions may be that consciousness itself is the most important frontier for human exploration and development, more significant than any external technological or material achievement, because it is the foundation from which all other human capabilities emerge. The Egyptians understood that by systematically developing and expanding consciousness through the skillful use of consciousness-altering substances, they could enhance every other aspect of human potential, including creativity, intelligence, wisdom, compassion, healing ability, and the capacity for transcendent spiritual experience. Their example shows us that the careful, respectful, and systematic use of consciousness-altering substances can be a powerful tool for human development and social progress when embedded within appropriate cultural, institutional, and spiritual frameworks that provide guidance, support, and integration for consciousness-expanding experiences. They achieved remarkable things not in spite of their extensive use of psychoactive substances, but because of their sophisticated understanding of how to use these powerful tools for enhancing human potential and creating magnificent civilizations. Modern attempts to suppress, prohibit, or marginalize consciousness-altering substances may actually be preventing us from accessing some of the most powerful tools available for human development and social progress. Tools that our ancestors used to create some of the most remarkable achievements in human history. The Egyptian example suggests that we might be able to solve many contemporary problems and achieve new levels of human flourishing If we could learn to approach consciousness-altering substances with the same sophistication, respect, and systematic understanding that characterized ancient Egyptian practices, the rediscovery and revival of these ancient approaches, adapted to contemporary conditions and enhanced by modern scientific understanding, could potentially inaugurate a new renaissance of human creativity, wisdom, and achievement that builds upon the best of both ancient wisdom and modern knowledge. The Egyptians got higher than we've ever believed possible, and in doing so, they achieved things that continue to amaze and inspire us thousands of years later, proving that consciousness alteration, when approached with proper knowledge and respect, can be one of the most powerful forces for human development and civilizational achievement in the entire history of our species. Their legacy reminds us that we are beings of unlimited potential, whose consciousness can be expanded and enhanced in ways that transform not just our individual lives, but our entire world, and that the systematic exploration of consciousness through the skillful use of consciousness-altering substances may be one of the most important and promising frontiers for creating a better future for humanity. The ancient Egyptians showed us what is possible when human consciousness is liberated from its ordinary limitations and allowed to soar to cosmic heights, and their example continues to call us toward the realization of our own unlimited potential for transcendence, creativity, wisdom, and the creation of civilizations worthy of our highest aspirations and deepest dreams.